All right, welcome back to the GO4CEO channel. The culture architect. Every CEO wishes they called sooner. My guest today asks, what if the biggest risk in your company isn't revenue, but the workplace culture you think is fine? Tommie Jo Brodie is an international best-selling author, attorney, and workplace strategist who has spent 20 plus years helping organizations turn compliance chaos into world-class culture. She shows leaders how to build teams people want to stay with while avoiding the legal admins or landmines that sink companies every year. Tommie Jo, thank you so much for coming on to the Go4CEO channel. How are you?
I'm well. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, super excited. And I know we were talking a little bit off camera of that cool picture and the dream of always being in that atmosphere of the beach and the umbrellas and the sun. So I'm super excited to have you on. And you bring a wealth of knowledge. You know, my sister-in-law is actually in the HR space for a pretty big, bold, multi-billion dollar company. I'm always hearing these things, right, that are happening and the culture that you create from even being a four-person business or a one-person business to a 20,000 employee business, and excited to have you on. So tell us about how Venice Solutions, started, right? Obviously that's the entity you formed, but you've got this illustrious background and these things that you've been able to do in your life. We'd always like to hear kind of that beginning part, like what made you think of this business? Was there multiple beforehand, or were you more of a corporate person? And you could share that initial story and we'll go from there.
Sure, absolutely. I served as an attorney for a long while and always employment defense. So working for companies trying to make things better. And so what I saw come across my desk were necessarily employee problems, right? That's what employment defense attorneys do. Workers' comp, EEOC, pick your favorite thing. And I noticed a pattern early on in my career that I didn't feel empowered to do anything about. And there was a communication breakdown every time, something with a bad culture. And you see that over and over. And I started to think, and then I started to say over the years, somebody should change this. Somebody should. And I kept looking behind me, and there's no somebody. No, nobody's changing it, you know? And that sometimes works out better for law firms, and I mean that respectfully, than it does the client. Winning is, what? You had the privilege of spending $40,000 and now you have an employee that's unhappy and doesn't work there and you have to hire somebody else, but you won. That didn't feel like a big win for the company, let alone whatever the employee felt. So after thinking about this and thinking about this, I was looking for a business model. Somebody else has to be doing this. And I really didn't find anybody doing that either. So I finally just said, okay, I guess somebody is me. And I'm going to really commit and bet my paycheck on the fact that we can do better, the fact that we really can communicate and improve cultures. So many people in the HR space and management and operations use that phrase. They say the culture's bad. Okay, how do you make the culture good? We can't just say that and complain about it for generations. So that's what I endeavored to do, and now here I am doing it.
Well, I love that there's a background there, right? And so many entrepreneurs flourish and blossom out of problems that are created or that continue to be annoying, right? And then a person like yourself goes, okay, well, I've got a solution, and I don't think anybody else is stepping up, so let's rock and roll, let's do this, right? So awesome. So you're in the midst of it. You're working with these companies as an attorney. Where is that transitional period? Did you start to do it while you were an attorney and start to say to yourself, okay, here's some SOPs, some things I'm going to start putting together? Or did you, freelance a little bit outside? Or what was that beginning part in getting that first client or even starting the business itself?
Sure. I was incredibly blessed because when I decided to leave my job, I thought, okay, this is not a side hustle, right? This is not kind of a little something I couldn't figure out how to do that as a part-time thing. So I decided to leave my job at a great company, a great global corporation. And when I said, hey, it's time for me to move on, they said, well, why don't we talk about that? Maybe you could pivot your role and keep some of those same responsibilities, but take us as a client. So that made it easy. I didn't count on that. I really didn't see that coming, but it made it a lot easier because you're starting with, hey, there's an option here. So that was great.
Well, that's a really cool statement and share, right? That you're in a company, you're an entrepreneur, really. I always affectionately call when I work for someone, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm always got that entrepreneur heart and spirit, but you found a solution, so found an opportunity to a problem. And then the actual company you work for turns you into that solution, right? So pretty awesome stuff. So that transition, was it that you took colleagues and started to implement what you had learned and put into process, or how was that dynamic? Because that's interesting, right? Like you won't go from W-2 employee, this is what you need to do, to entrepreneur, like, okay, here, how do I mesh that opportunity to build something good and significant?
Yeah, I mean, it was the techniques that I wanted to do for other places, we had already started to implement in-house there. So it was a natural transition. The part that was, hey, we are building this plane as we fly it, was my new role. And how does that work? And how do we not surrender the gains and improvements that we've made in a particular department that I had worked to build? How do we do this? And the answer will not surprise you. It was good communication.
Mm,
Nobody knew if that would work. Because if we're honest, when anytime you try something new, you hope it'll work. And in a moment of confidence, if you're trying to sell something, you might say, I'm sure this will work. But you don't actually know until you do anything if it'll work. So we just agreed. My colleague and slash boss and their very visionary CHRO, who's always cheering for out of the box ideas. We just sort of said, you know what, we think this can work and we'll try. And we will respect each other and we'll talk to each other. And if we hit a glitch that feels like it's not working, we'll figure it out. And that's what we've done. And here I am. I still have that company as a client, and I do different work. I do less work than I did in the beginning, but 3.5 years later, we still talk to each other. And of course, there's emails and meetings and all the normal stuff, but all of us have to perfect the skill of human communication. I think that's the secret sauce. It's not, there's nothing special about me. I just am committed to communicating with other people and figuring out what they need and finding a way to get it.
yeah, I mean, in that hook I shared, right, conflict and resolution has been something when I'm in leadership positions. I truly can say I'm a cheerleader of that. I feel like too many, planted managers, planted leaders sometimes use avoidance of conflict as one of their strategies, and it's certainly not a good thing. But it's painful to communicate, right? It's painful
Agreed.
to have that back and forth and really find out what the real issues are. So, all right. So look, you transition your W-2 into a 1099 per se, right? You become a solopreneur inside the company. It was a simple but nice transition. So help us understand then, all right, does that company now start to refer you to within the attorneys that you used to be colleagues with and now can be a vendor to? Or what was that transition to really start building the process of your business?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I want to share is that I was pretty sure I knew how this would go, right? I'm a 40 something. Geographically, I haven't deviated, so I'm sure that my clients will come from here. These are my people. This is who I know. So I started networking. I don't even drink coffee, and I met everybody for coffee. And I had lunch and I did some free public speaking, and I got zero, nothing, nada from any of the places that I was just sure it would break. I mean, I was even an elected official. I know how politics works. I know it, literally nothing. And I kept saying to my husband, like, this, I know it's kind of early, but this feels like this is not working. I'm doing all the things I'm, quote, supposed to do, and and it didn't work. But what did work is people that weren't, quote, supposed to bring the referrals started to. And so what I finally figured out, took me at least a year to figure that out, was, hey, you said you were going to change culture, you were going to change workplace, you were going to change communication. Quit being salesy and telling people that you're not being salesy, but quit doing that. Quit trying to do what somebody else is doing. You can't build a new thing with an old blueprint. And that's what
Mm.
I was trying to do. So go do it. Go talk to people, go find out what the pain points are. And I did that with employers, and I did that with attorneys, including attorneys that I didn't even know before that. Like, people, somebody else that's practicing employment law. One of my colleagues turned friend in Florida who I didn't even know 4 years ago. I just started talking to her one day at a seminar, and she spoke, and I said, "Hey, I enjoyed your remarks, blah, blah, blah," and started understanding what are her clients' pain points. What is that, up to the line of before they get to her, she has regular clients. She doesn't want them to need her that much, right? There's always plenty of work. So what do they need? And it turns out they need somebody to coach sometimes. They need somebody to train sometimes. So I started having very granular conversations of what does this look like in practice? Tell me what's going on with your clients. And so here we are. And now I've helped. I get a lot of referrals from attorneys, but I've done work for it. I've helped private nonprofit governmental entities, companies, in the private sector, of course, lots of those places that I really never saw it coming because I quit trying so hard. Maybe it's like high school dating. Nobody likes me. Nobody likes me. And then you quit trying so hard and you go, wow, somebody asked me to homecoming. That's a corny example, but it really felt a lot like that. And it worked.
I related to our first child. We tried very hard to have a kid in the first 6 to 9 months. It just wasn't working, and all of a sudden we just released the power. We said, "All right, whatever it is, it is." And like a month later, she gets pregnant. So it's amazing how that works, right? How
Absolutely.
Essentially, it's almost like something that is in the air, right? Like they feel the pressure, they feel other human beings, right, that are interacting with us. They know that you need to do business, right? I mean, obviously, we can't be in business without doing business and selling
Right.
something. But it's so unique in this professional service world where you add value, add value, add value, share a comment, share a resource with no, I guess, need to say, hey, let's officially ink a deal, and all of a sudden you get deals, right? Based on that type of scenario and attitude. So, all right, well, look, now you're fully in business, right? You give this 90-day to 360-day window where you're like, okay, this isn't working. I'm feeling a little bit frustrated. You talk to your husband, but then you start landing some clients and you start developing this momentum, right? Going into your second and third and fourth years. So what are some of the things that you maybe learned and didn't anticipate from owning your own business and that type of strategy?
Yeah, great question. It's first of all the just your perspective. My perspective of signing my paycheck on the front instead of the back is very different. I think when we work for anyone else, big or small company, you feel that sense of team. And yeah, you can be held back of, oh, I want a day off and I can't take it or whatever. But ultimately, there's somebody else there. And then the bottom line is rarely us. It's usually someone else. And so that was a lot of pressure for me. I had a law office, but that's very different. I mean, when you have a law office, you sort of put out a shingle and say, "Here's my phone number. Here's where you call." People have problems, and that's a model they understand, right? I need an attorney. I will call her. So they'll give me money. It'll be fine. Very different. This was a different thing that I was trying to build. So I just had to keep hanging in there and not be afraid to adapt and not be afraid to fail. Being afraid to fail is paralyzing to some people, particularly me. And we have to just let that go and say, sometimes that's going to happen. Do what you can do. So that's been my story.
No, and I appreciate that, and there's so much authenticity into that. They say I was reference Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrants where you go from employee trading hours for dollars, right, to self-employed, and you kind of own your own job. And then you transition into business owner, but a lot of people stay stuck in that that solopreneur to business owner, kind of in the middle because they don't know that like, hey, I don't have to do everything, but I don't know how to hire. I've got a great process and I know a lot of things, but I also need more people to grow my business. So it's like this quandary, scenario. So, as you started growing that part, and I know attorneys, we affectionately, other of us that aren't attorneys, are always curious that you can bill for 15 minutes and it's really the full hour. of value, right? So, how did you start to transition? Because obviously, like you said, you weren't at a big firm anymore. You weren't able to have some of those luxuries, and maybe travel and entertainment cards, those types of things. What were some of those things that you did, and how did you bill for your time now?
Well, one of the best things, I did a lot of things wrong, but one of the best things I did was I decided that, okay, I did this in part because I don't want to trade hours for dollars anymore. That's what we do. We're employees. And so I thought, I looked at some other sources and I said, okay, if I bill hourly, no matter how much I bill per hour, I can only bill 24 hours a day, even if I never sleep. So there's a cap. So that didn't seem like the best path to me. So I looked at it from the perspective of, okay, what is the service that I am providing? Maybe it will take me, pick a time, an hour and a half to give advice and say, here's how I think you ought to fix that problem. But the fact of the matter is, it took me 25 years to get to the point where I could figure out in an hour and a half how to fix it. So
Mm,
the value is what I decided to charge. There's a handful of things that my company bills hourly that are just unpredictable and we have to. Um, Candidly, I don't hardly ever do those things myself anymore. I set a price and I say, here's a deliverable in writing. Here's what we will give you. Either commit to fix, design a new process, train your team, whatever it is, endeavor to fix the pain point, and here's the flat rate it will cost you. And I look at that as I'm selling my expertise, because if somebody else could come in and train in 3 hours, if they had that expertise, if you could train your team in 3 hours and teach them these things, I assume you would do it and you wouldn't be talking to me. So it's not about how much per hour do I get. I'm just selling my expertise, and I don't apologize for that. But similarly, I don't nickel and dime people. When I meet with anybody for the first time, I don't charge them. I've started things before, and you know what? Hey, this is not going where we thought. Okay, that's fine. Call me sometime when it's better for you, different, whatever. And in the long run, that's worked out particularly well, I think.
So talking down that same avenue, when you think about you start to bill, and then you set a certain price to the value, did you ever find a time throughout that maybe beginning stage that you're like, oh, I charged a little bit too little, right? I could have charged more because they were so overwhelmed with the value and so overwhelmed. So like, were there times that you said, and then you got to finally where you felt that the marketplace allowed you to maximize that value per billing?
Yeah, I'm still learning, if I'm honest. And I the first time that was really so very stark for me, I was on a girl weekend with a good friend of mine, and I had pitched this proposal that was very important to me. And she was a CEO for a traditional company. And I said, "Oh, I think I'm going to get this one." This was very early on. She goes, "Oh," and I said, "May I show you what I sent?" Just she looks at it and she goes, "Oh, hate to tell you this, but I just paid." And then she named the name of a colleague, a friend of hers, and a colleague of mine. She goes, "I just paid her twice that much for half the work." I went, "Oh, darn it," but it was already sent. It was already out. So, my dad used to say, "What's the value of something? What will somebody pay?" And I think we all endeavor to do the right thing, of course, and be ethical and not overcharge. But it's tricky to figure out what the market is, particularly because I was and am trying to build something it's not a common business, right? There's not tons of people that are doing this. So what's that worth? I don't know. That was my honest answer in the beginning. And I figured out some of those things. And I've bid a few things that didn't work, that I didn't get the business, and that's okay. But what I'm experiencing is the overwhelming majority of the time I am. And I'm definitely settled into a spot where it feels like I'm picking the right amount. And now I have some history to say, okay, here's what I charged last time. That's about, the time and effort, which can be different, right? I mean, an hour with one person is not the same as an hour with another person. Some people are easier to work with than others, and I try to bake that into.
I love it. I love it. Well, look, there's a learning curve to everything. I always I love a saying I learned a long time ago, awkward, mechanical, natural, right? Everything's awkward at the beginning. And then actually you get kind of feeling less like without feelings and you're just mechanical, you know what you're doing. And then you get to a natural stage where, man, it's just that flow, that I love the word momentum I talk about in my book on the third chapter of just the accountability, but then how momentum kicks in so that you take massive action, right? So, and it sounds like you went through all those types of stages in those beginning and latter parts. So, all right, now let's nerd out a little bit on what you actually do, right? How are you literally going in to culture change? And are you working specifically with C-suite? Are you looking at, small to medium-sized businesses? Where in that area can you go and impact? And if without maybe to giving away all the secrets, but sharing the data points or the areas that you feel, and then you go and implement certain things. Can you share those?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think working with a very small company versus working with a very large company is not as different as some people might guess. People are people. So how we do it looks a little different, but ultimately what we're looking for is, okay, so you say the culture is bad or needs improved. What does that mean? Where are the pain points? Is it all of the people? Are we having, and how does it manifest? So do we have absentee problems? Do we have quality problems? So let's identify. I mean, it's easy to say, well, I want our culture to be better, or I want my employees to be more happy. Okay, so are you sending them to the beach? Like, what does that mean? And one of the challenges with starting at the C-suite, and I spend a lot of time there, and those people do really cool work. But one of the challenges is to say, hey, newsflash, you cannot understand this entire problem. Everybody does not look at your company like you do. Y'all are at the top of the pyramid here. We have to talk to everybody in the pyramid, or at least a representative sample. And then we have an honest conversation with leadership and say, okay, and it's me or whoever on my team is doing the work. We sit down and have interviews. It's not a survey. It's not somebody hiding behind a keyboard. And we say, tell me about this. Tell me what it's like to work for her. Tell me what it's like to be on his team. And you'd be surprised how very honest people will be. And
Mhm.
so we capture that in a way that's not, Sally said this, but it's very granular data. Hey, here's what we're hearing from this group or this team or whatever. These folks are calling off all the time. Here's what I think's going on. We can't fix a problem that we don't understand. So we try to articulate when we say bad culture or unhappy people, what are they unhappy about? Are they unhappy because they're unreasonable? Maybe. Maybe management has not towed the line enough. Typically, that's not it. And usually, it's not even money. I don't have money for this. I don't have money for that. You hear that from a lot of organizations, not just companies, nonprofits, whatever. That's not really what typically motivates people. At least it doesn't motivate them to the point of a bad culture.
Mm.
It's how they feel, how they're treated. And 20 years ago, to talk about soft skills or to talk about communication and how employees feel, that wasn't a thing. And I think I would have been laughed out of most business circles at that point. In fact, I might have been one of those people 20 years ago saying, no, that's not how we do this here. Turns out that's how we do it. And the younger generations in the workplace have a different vantage point of work and how it fits into their life. They have very different thoughts about the importance of work and what makes a good employer and a good place to work. And if those in leadership can't tune in and accept that reality, the culture is not going to get better. So those are the kind of things that we have to look at. Do people perceive that we respect them? You might think that a bonus once a year is great, or the pizza party is really doing it for them. Is it? What makes them happy? If they can't go to their kid's birthday and take cupcakes, there's no amount of money that will fix that. That's their child. So, what are we doing and how are we doing it? That was probably a longer answer than you might have been looking for, but those are the kind of things we dig into.
No, no, and I think that's so, on point. right? Even that, just that last example, how there's understanding in a culture of, hey, look, things happen. Cars break down, kids get sick, events get happen, and as I mean, if you have a kid or multiple kids like I have, and I don't know if you right, but other people do, you know that your schedule is crazy nowadays. Like football, basketball, sports and art stuff and dance. Earlier today, one of my daughters was showing me an old video from 2020, 5 years ago, when she was an extreme dance. And that culture of work ethic, and at 7 years old, I had to take her 3 or 4 times during the week to different places. And yeah, I mean, I've had the flexibility, right, being in commercial banking, but that's the hat I wear on a day-to-day basis. And there's some flexibility in that. But I was joking my wife, I'm like, I'm not at a factory, I'm not stamping metal, and I don't have to be in front of a machine. So I do have that luxury. But then how do we feel or make that stamping metal manufacturing person feel appreciated as well, right? And how can they maybe make up some time where they could take a 3 hour, window in their day and enjoy their kid, right? As an example. So what a cool thing. And I will say, I mean, culture can be led, or 100%, led by obviously the leader of the business. But how do you see, and when you go into organizations, the lower tier, right? And I don't mean to demean it, it's more like the worker bee, and then that middle management. Where have you seen some growth and opportunity in that?
I think where that happens is when the leadership is open. Are you open to change that you can make? And it's easy to say yes. Lots of people say, "Oh, I'm very open to change." And then you sit down and start talking to, "Oh, no, we don't do that. Oh, no, we don't do that."
Yeah.
Well, right, and that's what you got. So again, if we use the same blueprint, we're not going to build a different house. That's just not how this works. Then we have the conversations of, okay, something needs to change, and money comes up very early. Okay, let's take money off the table. Not talking about that. We have whatever. So use your manufacturing example. We have 3 shifts. All right. Um, we do whatever they're doing, this many hours, this many. Do we have to do it that way? Oh yes, we've done that for a long time. Right, heard you. Do we have to do that way? Can we have some people that work 4 tens? Can we have whatever it is? And for leaders who are so very accomplished, sometimes they get pretty stuck in their own box. So where have we had success? In really walking people through, hey, here's a bunch of options. It's not the standard canned options of, well, do you want to work on this shift or that shift? Or everybody has to pick a shift. These are the existing ones. Everybody has to work 40 hours a week. No, that they might want them to. You may have always done it that way. That's not how it has to work. So, there's a lot of opportunity and success there when we really listen to what people are asking for, and not start with preconceived rules. And we all do it. We don't realize we do, but we do. We do it with our children. We do it with people at home. Think about your holiday plans. What am I doing for the holiday? Well, this is what Christmas Eve or Hanukkah or whatever. And we're the same way at work because we're people. So we have to get out of those boxes, and then we can begin to experience success at all levels of the organization, I think.
And change is always that inevitable word, right? That people, most human beings, like to avoid, but
That's
it's
right.
inevitable, and you have to go through it to really to grow, to shed the layer of what you used to be, right, and used to do. So I love the notion too that there's a younger generation, and I'll admittedly say I turned 50 this year. And it's interesting seeing even just the number. I'm like, man, I'm turning 50. I don't even feel, I feel like I'm 29 or whatever. But um, but that means that there's a couple generations behind me, right? And they're already in the workforce, and I have to adapt to the what they is. I'm a Gen X guy, so I love talking to you, and and like our work ethic has just been like grind, 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 do it, do it, do it, right? At least for my generation, right? And baby boomers and Gen Xers, I think we all think the same in that sense. but then the Y, the X, and the other, whatever the other acronyms are and stuff, are coming with a different philosophy. So it's really interesting stuff. So from that perspective, how are you marketing to businesses nowadays? Maybe a little bit different from when you started, obviously from that inner working of your own company and going out to the marketplace. But is there anything, any new verbiage, any new videos that you're doing? Are you doing a little bit something different to attract that leader that maybe founded a company? The guy's 27 years old, right? And he's running a multi-billion dollar evaluated company, at least, those types of things. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So as far as what I'm doing for marketing, I'm currently in the middle of a pivot for exactly the reason that you articulated. Hey, I'm not the same company. Now I actually have a small team around me to do these things. So I think that the honest answer is ask me in 6 months. But in general, what we're trying to do is shift completely away from that traditional, here is my website, and nothing wrong with that. I'm not mocking that, but I think we've just sort of exhausted that. And so I'm trying to be out there more with the help of a professional publicist to put me out as a thought leader and make that as a more organic feeling segue, whether it's truly organic or not. When I'm making the effort, I don't know. But that's what we're trying to do to start to make sure that the starting place is always the right audience and that we're talking their language as opposed to, oh, I heard of this company. They did a neat little giveaway. Maybe I'll talk to them and then it's mismatched. Um, I think I'm not at all good at sales. I had someone ask me recently, okay, you're saying that you close like 80% of the things that you pitch or that you bid on or whatever, and how do you get that high? And I said, I just don't bid on that many things. And I think that's true because the way that we're now making connections is shifting. And we're starting by talking to people who are already interested, who are working in this space and already need some help as opposed to a more general business audience. And I don't pretend to know how to do all that myself. I think, when you spend money on professionals, they are professionals and they know what they're doing. I know employment and HR and people. I don't know a lot about marketing. I don't know much at all, as a matter of fact. So I have a professional publicist and she does a great job and she finds cool, fun connections like you and then I get to have fun instead of sitting in a networking thing where it's uncomfortable and I wish I weren't there. And then I have to tell somebody later how great it was because it wasn't. I'd much rather do this.
Yeah.
So.
No, and I love that you had shared that authenticity, right? And I'm super glad that, 5 years ago when I started the podcast, it was just me going to my network and saying, "Hey, can you please be on this podcast? I just want to talk about your business." I don't know. I don't like being on camera, this, that. And it's interesting how it's shifted. And I'm talking about baby boomers and Gen Xers, how we've been like, "Oh, wait, we need to be on podcasts. We need to share." And there's such cool things that happen when I could take a 30, 60-second clip of what you just shared. And all of a sudden the young people or the younger generations like, "Oh, that's awesome. Tommie Jo, I'm gonna get a hold of her. That was so cool what she said." Right. And it's just a different way of marketing. So really cool stuff. So I will say you mentioned something pretty interesting because I just had a gentleman on CFO type service turnaround type company in the capital market space. And he said he starts to put the people around him, right? Even though he's the master expert, you touched on it lightly that you've grown the business. What has that felt like, right? Like from your own leadership perspective and allowing people now to take over components of the way that you onboard clients.
Well, let me first of all say I wish I could look you in the eye and say, oh, it was beautiful. I planned it and it went so well and I had a chart. But the fact of the matter is, it felt like drinking from a fire hose. It sometimes felt like I can't breathe. It often felt like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I ever started this company. It was scary and it was clumsy, but you can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to show up. And it happened in the middle of all of that fear and anxiety and yuck. And, some days I thought, okay, only my mom and my husband and God are cheering for me, but I'm still going to do this. And then at one point I just looked around and went, wow, we have clients. And wow, something else came along and something else came along. I'm still not at the point and doubt I ever will be at the point where I say, oh yeah, that's always coming. That's really not my personality. But um, I would say that in the midst of the ugly and unpredictable, and I think that's so important to talk about,
Mhm.
because it's easy to get caught up in ourselves when we've had a relative amount of success. But I would say to anybody that's even thinking about starting a business, you know, what you think will happen will not. Your first idea will be bad. Plan on that and do it anyway, and just keep going. Keep showing up, keep being honest, keep working hard. And I believe that most everybody can get there. But I think it's important to not pretend like it, well, I just work so hard, I'm awesome. No, that's really not what happens for anybody, I don't think.
Yeah. No, and in large scale now, because of podcasts and the ability to be out there in kind of an authentic way, even just doing short clip videos, you're sharing kind of those nuances of how that really happens, right? And that's why people relate to you because they're saying, "Oh, you know what? Actually, this person's not lying, right? Or not making it seem rosy." And look, there are some people that you're like, "Holy cow, like that's incredible how they just
No,
came out of nowhere and just did it," right? But for the most part, it takes a larger percentage of people to kind of get through the grind process of everything. So I appreciate you sharing that. So look, operations, scaling, funding, all these different areas, and you've concentrated on this one unique part, right, of culture and development within the scientific side of things, right? Tell us about a little bit about your book, right? How are you using it? What are some of the things that you shared in that book that maybe, translate on a day-to-day basis?
sure. So I'm really just getting started with the book. It was published this year in July of 2025, and I never had any intentions of writing a book. And a couple people said to me, "Well, look, if you want to be a thought leader, you kind of got to act like one. You have to put this out there." And so it's really designed to be two things. One is a conversation piece, for me to say like, "Hey, here's my thoughts that I've articulated in a book." And the other one is, and this may sound corny, but there are businesses or people who work in businesses who need this advice, who cannot afford, even basic consulting fees, or maybe they think they need it, but the owner or boss won't go for it. But most people have $14 or whatever it costs on Amazon. So it was, to me, it was a give back. I mean, I don't know that I have a ton of ways to give back, but there's been an awful lot of people that have helped me get here. People in my personal life, but lots of people in my professional life. And I thought, if I write this little humble playbook, I do think people will get good from this.
Mm.
And probably the first person who was a former client, um, maybe an existing client, but I don't have work for them right now. But that's how I know her. I did some work in her office. She called me and said, I read it cover to cover and I loved it. I made notes and I'm going to use this at the office. And I was so flattered by that. I thought, you know what? If I don't get one more speaking thing or one more paying client, I did good. And that was something that, as corny as it sounds, I really felt good about that. That I had written it in a way, with a team of editors, helpers, whatever, not just the Tommie Show here, but that we have put out a product that is actually helpful to somebody, that they can just order it on Amazon, spend a tiny little bit of money, and that it helped. That really felt good. I mean, when you do employment defense, you don't have tons of feel good moments, like, oh, wow, you successfully denied somebody their FMLA. Way to go, Tiger. There's just not tons of feel good moments in that. So that did feel very good. And it was meaningful.
Well, I'll tell you, Go4CEO community, you just heard a little mini masterclass, and selfishly, as mutual authors, I feel completely the same. Uh, from the 7 reviews, I started my book launched October 9th, and the 7 reviews that I have up there, and I'm hoping for more, and I'm encouraging certain people to do it. I've said to myself, "Wow, man, the feedback and just the all of a sudden the randomness of an email." or a picture saying, hey, I picked up your book, super excited to read it. And then the aftermath of it, I feel the same way. So I think us as authors now, it's so funny. I don't know if you feel this way, but I actually feel like telling everybody, hey, you have a book in you. You have a book in you. You know, not you're going to get a book. You have a book in you. So, um,
Absolutely. Totally
yeah.
agree.
Yeah, because like you said, it wasn't our intention to write it, and that was me. I just kind of was writing some thoughts over the last couple of years and stories. My wife was like, "Hey, teach about sales and stuff." And I was like, "Nah, not yet. I don't, I'm not in that genre yet of my mindset." And it was a process that I came up with a formula. So anyway, look, I appreciate you coming on. As we end our interviews, we always end them the same way. CEO, right? So C is for client experience, and that's certainly developed over the years from when you started internally in your company and switched them to a client, to E for engagement, and then O for operational excellence, which is the tools that you're using to manage your business. So client experience, just high level value proposition dealing with your company. What should a client experience look like in your eyes?
It needs to be about the client, not about me. We mean well, but sometimes we all get stuck in, well, here's what I know and here's what I think I have to offer. So therefore, it's what you need. It's not. What do they need and what are their pain points? And they need to know and feel and experience that I'm really trying to change their work, their world. It's not about me, it's about them.
I love it. I love it. So now, Tommie Jo, share us a little bit of how you engage, right? Every business owner I've had on this podcast, I mean, it's amazing how many different strategies they have in this engagement route. So, and I'm talking about, do you like taking people out to dinner? Is that your favorite thing? Do you do retreats with your clients? Do you tell your employee, do you share bonuses with your employees? Like, how do people engage with Tommie Jo, and why do they love to engage with you?
Well, I really have no idea, but I'll tell you what I think it is. You'd have to ask them. I'm a gift giver.
Okay.
That's my love language. I love doing that. My husband, if he were here, I'm sure he'd say it's because she likes to shop, but I digress. So I like to give when I'm speaking, when I go to a client, when it's the holidays, when it's not. I give people fun little gifts that makes them smile. So I had with one of my team members, we just did a trade show booth with a very large organization that's new to us. New team member said, hey, I think this is a good idea. Okay, I don't know, but you got to believe in your people. Let's try it. I'll come with you. Let's do it. So I had someone come up with an idea. I said, what will our booth be? And he came up with, well, you want to do team building. We're going to do Legos. So we
Mm,
gave away Legos. And it was fun. I've given a few client slash friends little signs that say, I'm not just HR, I'm cool HR. And it's things that are thoughtful, that are personal, that are memorable. I do like to go out to dinner and we do that sometimes, but I think the thing that's a little bit more unusual and that people find engaging is that I try to give little gifts that are personal, things that they've told me that they like or they notice. Like the one gal loves coffee, so I like once a quarter I send her a fun little coffee sleeve. I mean, it's $12, right? Most everybody's got $12, but it's thoughtful and it's well received.
well, you heard her, right? She was listened to, and such a cool share right there about the way you engage and your own style and your own way of catering to people and what their desires are, and then acknowledging those. So, last one is operational excellence. So, if you think about the tools, right? AI is a big deal nowadays, but are you, a Monday person? Are you a certain CRM type person? Do you have a workflow chart that you use? Are you old school? Do you do everything on notes and sticky notes, right? Stuff like that. Like, what's your operating rhythm within your business?
I keep saying that I'm going to be very digital and cool and hip, but the truth is, just off camera where you can't see, there's a billion sticky notes, and my mind works faster sometimes than my ability to execute it. So I end up going old school. The coolest thing I do is put notes in my phone or a voice memo to myself. But yeah, as I think of it, literally sticky notes, and then I can arrange them and then they make their way into some legitimate computer type workflow. But yeah, start very old school, sticky
Yeah.
notes.
And you know what? Old school still works big time, right? Because I will say I've had people on the podcast that talk about tech stacks, and they're like, John, we have 30 tech things and we use three of them, right? And we're spending all this SaaS money on all this stuff, and it's like, okay, I haven't really formulated a real competent way to use all 30 things. So sometimes it's just the old school sticky note, that note that you wrote to yourself, that little thing that you put on your finger to call, Marianne at XYZ Corporation, and that allows you to follow up and do the right thing. So awesome stuff. So Tommie Jo, share with us, everybody, is there website to go to? How do people engage with you? They listen to this and they're like, man, I want to do business with Tommie Jo. I want to engage her company. How do they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So there's a couple websites. My company website is venicesolutionsgroup.com, or just my name, Tommie with an IE, TommieJoBrode.com. And that's got a little bit more information about the book and speaking and that kind of stuff. So
Awesome, awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for being on the Go4CEO channel. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I don't say it enough, and we should blow this thing apart. I mean, it's obviously the book's out, excited about that, but let's keep this community going. I mean, ladies like Tommie Jo are the reason that I started the podcast in 2020. I said to myself, it doesn't have to be Mark Cubans of the world, super famous people. I want to have the real people doing, 300,000, half a million, 3 million, 20 million in business, but these people are affecting their communities. They're inside, they're working with the companies that need their help in these types of situations. So Go4CEO community, follow Tommie Jo, go to her website and be a part of the movement that she has as well. So thank you, Tommie Jo, for coming on the Go4CEO channel.
thank you so much for having me. It was